Hey guys, it's the Melblade 5, back with even more unpopular opinions. But this time, I'm taking things up to a whole new level because I'm going to express some of what I deem to be my extremely unpopular opinions. And what I mean by that is opinions where nobody else feels the same way as me. I'm not even exaggerating when I say this. I have never seen anybody share any of these opinions I'm about to discuss, which is the entire basis behind why exactly I'm making this video in the first place. Well, in actuality, it was 3 specific opinions that these circumstances just happened to apply to, and I've been really wanting to get said opinions off my chest because they've been bugging me so much lately to the point that I can't hold it in anymore. Then I just brainstormed other unpopular opinions I have that no one else agrees with that I found worth discussing to better justify this video's existence. Be forewarned though, when it comes to those 3 particular opinions, I know for a fact that so many people are going to be pissed off by them because they are that unpopular. So if you don't like hearing different points of view, I suggest you stop watching. You may be wondering why I'm even bothering to make this video when those opinions themselves are likely to produce tons of hate and dislikes. Well, I've never been one to not speak my mind, no matter how unpopular that may be, like how I fucking despise the Golden Wind dub whilst everybody else seems to worship it. But if I went over that subject, then we'd be here for hours. And after enduring years of slander being made against me with people harassing me as if I'm like Logan Paul or something, I have the belief that I've got nothing left to lose. Which is why I'm perfectly okay with publicly saying things such as I really like Fairy Tail and that its power of friendship notion is blown so out of proportion when it really only happens twice in the whole series, which would also take hours for me to fully go over. But getting back on track, once again, me covering these opinions is also me acknowledging that I'm the only person who thinks this. So for anyone who angrily disagrees, you can at least take solace in knowing you have the majority rule. So now it's time I open this controversial can of worms. So first up is an opinion I very briefly mentioned once in the past, but never explained my reasoning because it would have been going off topic back then. But it did come to mind when thinking of other extremely unpopular opinions that I felt it was time for me to fully express my feelings on this. I like Mega Man's voice in Mega Man 11. 11 was able to break conventions by being a classic Mega Man game with good voice acting, and it seems many people also share this view. However, that never applied to Mega Man himself. Ever since the game came out, I've seen so many people say Mega Man's voice sucks, but I've always liked it. And honestly, I'd say it's probably my favorite out of all of Mega Man's voices. The main criticism I hear of his voice is that it sounds too old, given that he's supposed to be a kid. Well, for one, it's a little weird to try to apply exact human ages to a robot, but far more importantly is that I still think he sounds kiddie. Sure, it's a bit older than what his age would likely be if he was human when going off his appearance, sounding more like he's in his mid-teens, but the voice still sounds young to me, which still makes it believable for him to have that kind of voice.
I can take it, Doctor. I want to do this, no matter the cost. Hook me up!
There's also the obvious fact that, unlike most of classic Mega Man's previous voices, it actually sounds good and fits the character. 2 of the things I consider to be most important when voice acting for a character alongside just good acting. It's miles better than the Mega Man 8 voice where he sounds like a little girl. I feel that Ben Diskin was able to accurately capture both the youthfulness and righteous sides of Mega Man's personality into a good sounding voice with good acting. So I get kind of bummed out when I see some people heavily panning his performance. I remember seeing Game Grumps play 11 when it came out, and Aaron even said that he prefers Mega Man sounding like a girl.
But in this one in America, they gave him like a, I'm here! And it's like,
right.
I don't know, man, I kind of want him to be like a little girl.
I'm not hating on his opinion or anything, but I think Mega Man having a girly voice is really ill-suited towards his character. And I guess while I'm on this subject, I can bring up a very similar opinion on another version of Mega Man. Being that I also like X's voice in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. I see so many people hating on that voice too, when I think it's very unjust. It's not as good as his X8 and Maverick Hunter X voices, but it still strongly fits X's own righteousness and hopeful beliefs in my opinion.
As long as there's hope, we can change the future.
I honestly don't understand why people say this doesn't suit him at all. It too is way better than the likes of the X4 voice where he too sounded like a girl because it was the same woman, and the X7 voice where he sounded incredibly bored all the time.
Why must Reploids continue this accursed cycle of aggression?
If Capcom ever makes an X9, I would really like to see them bring this voice for X back. The same goes for Sigma's Infinite voice too. Next, we are already heading over to the reverse, where it's something that I myself dislikes, but everybody else loves. I've said before that I've never really been a fan of the Pokemon spin-off games, because most of them just don't appeal to me much to buy them, and even recently seeing some proper gameplay of the Mystery Dungeon games for the first time, I honestly found it very boring. The only exception has ever been Pokken Tournament, because it's literally Pokemon mixed with Tekken. However, there is one particular Pokemon spin-off that has never appealed to me in any form, but everyone else adores. Pokemon Snap. I think Pokemon Snap is an incredibly boring and repetitive game, but everyone else freaking loves it, says it's one of the best Pokemon games ever made, and some even say it's their favorite Pokemon game of them all. And I've never been able to see why. Now, admittedly, I have never actually played the game myself, and I know that watching the game and playing it yourself are very different experiences. But just from seeing others play it, I know that I would not enjoy Snap myself. Starting off, the entire premise is that you just take pictures of Pokemon, which on its own doesn't excite me, and it's specifically a rail shooter game, but you're shooting them with a camera, which is also a genre that doesn't really appeal to me. So not a good start for making me interested, but even with that, I find the way they executed this premise to be a dull experience, even for the time it came out. On top of the gameplay mostly amounting to just waiting for a Pokemon to do something or chucking a ball for an event to happen to get a bunch of points, it gets especially repetitive when the game forces you to replay levels multiple times in order to unlock the next one. It's not even like one of those games where, if you're good enough, you could have already met the requirements to reach the next level without having to go back and do so. The point requirements in this game are so high that it's mandatory for you to replay levels, and often a ton of times later down the road. Many people hate on Skyward Sword for making you go back to previous areas, even though those areas will have something very different or lead to a completely new part of that area you never got to explore before. Whereas Pokemon Snap does the same thing, except the new stuff on replays amounts to one new thing you can take a picture of, or an incredibly short alternate pathway, yet nobody seems to complain about that. There's also the fact that the scoring system is incredibly flawed because Professor Oak doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. He'll often give you more or less points for things that didn't apply to the picture you submitted, and even the people who like the game admit this. So in some cases, you could even get screwed out of meeting the point requirements for the next level because of Oak's AI being stupid, forcing you to replay another level again. And there's not even that many levels in total, so you're gonna see the same stuff so many times. And in order to unlock the final level with Mew, you have to play every level again to take a picture of some random landmark. I know that if I played this game, I would get so sick of playing these same levels again that I just quit. I feel like I was in a mental institute. I'm not trying to offend anyone who likes the game, these are just my brutally honest impressions on it. All these thoughts ended up coming back upon them announcing the sequel for the Switch, where everybody is treating it like the second coming of Jesus. Meanwhile, I'm just like, meh? Now, oh boy. It's time to cover one of the big three opinions that led to me making this video in the first place. As if the previous one didn't anger people enough, this will certainly spawn an angry mob to come after me. Just a heads up, I will probably get really freaking angry during this section because this subject has really annoyed me for several years and has now recently started to really piss me off because of what came out of it. So if you passionately disagree with my initial statement, you may want to skip this one. Here goes! I hate Min Min, and I hate that she's in Smash Brothers! I've never had an interest in ARMS because I thought the gameplay looked pretty uninteresting, and I find all the characters boring in both design and personality. But Min Min definitely takes the cake on that point. The reason why I hate Min Min is simply because she's so overrated. She could honestly be the definition of overrated. Everybody loves her, calls her the best character in the game, and she was even voted the most popular one. But I think she's so boring, even for a game that has a boring cast in my opinion. She literally has no personality at all. Her entire character is just that she likes noodles. Truly, we have reached the peak of character design! That's hardly even a personality. That's more something you put in the likes-dislikes section of a bio. Granted, ARMS isn't a story or character-driven game, but with all the other characters, I can see a personality from their body language and mannerisms. For example, I can tell that Springman is a pretty energetic and exuberant guy from the way he acts, but with Min Min, she just has this neutral, straight-faced expression the entire time. It never changes, not even when she wins. It's pretty sad when the fucking robot has more of a personality than you. The only reason I've seen people give for why they like Min Min is because she has noodles for hair. Again, truly we have reached the peak of character design! There's probably more to it, but that's all they say. And it's such a minuscule reason for liking a character. That's like if I said I love Dante just because his jacket's red. Personally, I also find her design to be very boring. It's like the designers just said, we need a Chinese character, so just get every basic Chinese trope and throw it together without expanding on any of them. Whilst I think most of the other character designs are at least a little more fleshed out, even if I'm not a fan of theirs either. Normally I would just find Min Min to be super generic and have a painfully neutral opinion on her if it were left at that. But it was seeing so many people obnoxiously spamming about her like she's this amazing, well-written and well-crafted character that I started to dislike her because I found it so annoying to see this everywhere. Even on things not related to ARMS at all. When I find her to be so boring in all aspects. But it was the whole build up to the ARMS character in Smash Bros. That caused my dislike to grow into outright hatred. Most people were predicting it was going to be Min Min, and once again, I saw so many people treating her like this amazing character who would be a perfect addition, and it just started to annoy me even more. I was dead against Min Min being added from the get-go, not just because I don't like her, but also because she's completely irrelevant to the lore of ARMS and the game's marketing. Which goes against how Smash Bros. Is primarily about Nintendo's most iconic characters and other gaming icons. So adding someone who's basically a side character as the sole representative of a series wouldn't make any sense. Plus, the reasons I saw for why people were predicting Min Min were frankly nonsensical. 1. She has the dragon arm for projectiles, except every character in the game has access to every type of arm. I've never even played the game and I know this, so it could have been anyone and they could have just given them the dragon arm for an attack. 2. She can kick, so it can add on to combos. I don't think kicking should be a deciding factor for a character getting in Smash Bros. Besides, Sakurai could just take creative liberty and give any character a few kicks to mix things up. And 3. She's Yabuki's favorite. I'll get back to that later. In my opinion, it should have been Ribbon Girl, because she's basically the mascot of the game alongside Springman. She could arguably be considered more of the mascot, considering she was the very first character revealed for the game, and is even beating up Springman on the box arts, and she was very prominent in the marketing. Even characters like Max Brass and Dr. Coil, who are very important to the game's lore, would have been better choices than Min Min, even if I don't think they would be that good either due to being DLC. And then, amongst all this speculation, I saw some people being so incredibly close-minded by assuming it would be Min Min, saying things like, I can't wait for tomorrow's Direct when Min Min gets announced. So part of me didn't want her to get in just so those people would have to eat their words. So then, on the day of the Direct, when the trailer started, and it already gave it away by starting at her freaking noodle shop, I wanted to bash my head against my desk.
That's the saltiest thing I've ever tasted. And I once ate a big heaping bowl of salt.
And everybody started celebrating, which made me want to frickin' scream. But I got even more annoyed when it was revealed that the deciding factor for why Min Min got in was because Yabuki told Sakurai to put her in because she's his favorite. I don't mean any disrespect to Yabuki when I say this, but I find that to be kind of selfish, because you're basically putting your own wants over everyone else's. Imagine if Yabuki's favorite was actually the least popular character, and they got in because of that. People would get so mad, but because it's Min Min, she gets a pass. This is literally the same thing that happened with Spencer in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. It doesn't matter if he's an irrelevant character from an irrelevant game that flopped critically and financially from over a decade ago. Let's put him in just because he was one of our developers' favorite characters to play in the last one. And even then, Spencer was at least the main character of the game he's from. Imagine if we got Cammy instead of Ryu as the first Street Fighter character, or Melia instead of Shulk, or Aerith instead of Cloud. characters who aren't as important in the plot compared to the main character. It wouldn't feel right. I know that comparison doesn't completely work considering Springman was already an assist trophy, but when you had another mascot in the form of Ribbon Girl, I think the choice should have been obvious. I was so mad that such a boring character with no personality or story relevance could get in Smash Bros. Over way more important characters because of a large and vocal fan following that I personally see as unwarranted, as well as developer favoritism, which goes against the core idea of Smash Bros. So now I can expect to see Oblivion NPC as the next DLC fighter. At least the stage looks fun. Okay, so to bring down the salt levels a bit, let's go over a lesser, extremely unpopular opinion before moving on to the other two. And it's also time to fill the Fire Emblem quota for these videos with another view related to free houses. The whole namesake of free houses comes from how you choose one of 3 houses to teach at the Officers Academy. And before the game came out, there were many people stating which house they were going to pick and what they deemed the best. I already touched on how Black Eagles was my favorite and the one I picked despite most people calling it the worst one before release, even though most people picked it anyway. But I wanted to look at the reverse, as that's truly where the unpopularness lies. Before release, most people I saw said they were going to pick the Blue Lions, and many were even going about saying it was factually the best one. However, Blue Lions was actually my least favorite house. Now, this opinion was based on the first impressions I got from the marketing at the time, but a lot of those impressions are still implanted in my mind to the point that I don't think of some of the Blue Line students as fondly as most others. While each house did have some factor that made me consider choosing them before I finalized my decision on Black Eagles, the main reason I ultimately chose Black Eagles was because it had the most students I liked from first impressions, and my personal tier list follows that criteria. This was all based on how the characters looked and the brief descriptions of their personalities, which in some cases weren't even a good representation of their character. Marianne. So I'm gonna end up sounding very shallow here. The only Black Eagle students I wasn't a fan of at first were Linhardt and Caspar, just because of their designs. Then Golden Deer came second, mainly because of Claude, Lysithia, and Marianne, the last two only because of their designs. Whereas those I didn't like at first were Lorenz because of his terrible haircut, Ignatz because I thought he looked like a stereotypical nerd and an Asian Harry Potter, and Raphael because his shirt is too small. Then Blue Lions had the most students I just did not care for at first. When I first saw Dimitri, I wasn't a fan of him because I thought he looked stupid. I actually thought, he looks like a pot noodle landed on his head. But obviously this was before
Kill every last one of them!
In fact, the only reason I even considered picking Blue Lions at first was just to see Dimitri's personality change firsthand. But I didn't have that kind of experience with the other Blue Line students prior to release. For example, Mercedes came across as generic goody two-shoes religious girl at first, Felix appeared to just be a generic edgy dude, and Sylvain was like sane 2.0, even though I already liked him for that. They just didn't feel as interesting at the time, and I wasn't that big on most of their designs either. The only one that really struck a chord with me was Ingrid, which is kind of why she was the only one I recruited in my first playthrough, though I would have recruited Sylvain if I had more time. And while my overall opinion of the Blue Lions has certainly improved after getting to know them more from playing the game, such as there being more to Sylvain's character than just being sane, like I said earlier, a lot of those first impressions still stick with me when it comes to some of them, namely with Felix, Annette, and Ash. But I still haven't played Azure Moon, so I'm sure whenever I get around to that, I'll end up liking those ones more. Now it's time to go over the second of the big free opinions in this video. And I know this one will bring an even bigger angry mob after me. At the time of writing this script, I recently finished Persona 5 Royal. And there was the whole thing of me being salty when this game got announced because it meant everything I did in the original was pointless. But I got the game anyway since it's still Persona 5. I even managed to max out all confidants, do all the requests, and get all the trophies on my first playthrough, giving me my first ever platinum trophy. I already have this one jerk who harasses me whenever I bring up Persona 5 by effectively saying my opinion on the game is wrong since, in his own words, the characters are shit because the Neptunia games are better. But I'm gonna get more comments like that after I express this next opinion. However, this opinion will involve me covering major spoilers for Royal, so if you haven't finished the game yourself, you should skip to the next one. I really like most of the changes they made in Royal, the keyword there being most, but there is one prominent change that really bothers me when I think about it, and I'm the only person who feels this way. The biggest and most marketed addition to Royal is the inclusion of a brand new party member, Kasumi Yoshizawa. Upon a reveal, Kasumi instantly became popular with the fanbase, which then grew even more over time to the point that when Royal came out, I saw many people calling her things like a top-tier waifu. However, I'm honestly not a big fan of Kasumi.
So you have chosen death.
It's not that I dislike her per se, but I just did not care about her for the vast majority of the game. To sound like a broken record once again, one of the main and many reasons why I love the Phantom Thieves so much is because when it comes to each of the official human members, I can relate to them to at least some degree on top of just them being misfits. But with Kasumi, she had nothing that I could really relate to. And don't misunderstand, I'm not saying that I need to find a character relatable in order to like them or think they're well written. For instance, I don't relate to Akechi at all, because I've never gone through anything remotely close to the shit he has. But I still think he's a well-written antagonist because of the simultaneous parallels and contrasts he has to the others. It's just that in Kasumi's case, I couldn't really connect with her in addition to the issues I had with her personality. She's very upbeat. However, she's too upbeat, if that makes any sense. Throughout that majority of the game, she has the same happy expression and tone of voice like 99% of the time. Even during moments where she's being more serious, her voice still kind of has that upbeat tone which felt very unnatural to me. The only time she didn't sound happy was when she was talking about her dead sister, which was also the only time I felt any legit emotion towards her at that point in the game. I just found it so unrealistic and uninteresting for a character to be that happy all the time. I love Persona 5's characters partially due to them almost feeling like real people outside of their exaggerated quirks. However, when watching Kasumi, it really felt like I was watching a fictional character by comparison. Her whole personality felt fake, which in hindsight that might have been intentional, but I don't know. Further adding on to my not-so-great impressions of her was the fact that she came across as a discount Makoto. They're both honest students with dead relatives and end up feeling useless at some point prior to their awakenings. But I think Makoto executes these aspects a lot better and they're more intertwined with one another. It also doesn't help that Makoto is the one I relate to the most, so I'm gonna end up being more critical when I see them as trying to copy their homework but not as good. Makoto felt useless because she actively believed she was a burden to everyone around her, especially Sai since she had to take their parental responsibilities after their dad died. Meanwhile, Kasumi felt useless because she didn't do so well in gymnastics. I'm not even trying to sound biased, that's literally the case. Similarly, Makoto being an honor student ties into her being a misfit, since it makes all the other students view her as some stuck-up sycophants, in addition to the adults using that to manipulate her for their own benefit, which then links back to her feeling useless when she can't get the results they want. On the other hand, Kasumi's honor student status is shown to be almost a complete positive for her, and this links to another gripe I had with her, since Kasumi isn't even a misfit. She's well liked and admired by almost everyone else as soon as she's introduced. The early parts of the game are filled with dialogue from other students saying how great and pretty she is, and the teachers don't even manipulate her like with Makoto. They just try to reap the rewards that come with her success. The only time you hear anything negative about her in-game is from background dialogue during transition scenes where off-screen NPCs are bitching about her behind her back only because they're jealous of the special treatment she gets with being an honor student. So they're really only complaining about her being better. And there's only about 3 lines of dialogue like this throughout the whole game. Everything else is overwhelmingly positive. Because of this, throughout the early and midway portions of the game, I kept feeling I wasn't really liking her, but I knew it was still fairly early and wanted to wait until later before giving a full judgment on her. And then I got to her awakening scene. This moment honestly left me feeling very annoyed, and I started to even straight up dislike her because of it. The awakening scenes are some of my favorite moments in the game, because I love what it represents for the respective character. Each of them had to endure being constantly screwed over and mistreated, and now's the moment where they've had enough of that bullshit, and are standing up against it with their will of rebellion they developed from those experiences. They rip off their masks to awaken their personas, their inner selves, and they break free from the metaphorical chains that had been binding them to this unjust society and forcing them to conform to the shitty situations they've been thrown into in order to fight back. It gives them so much character growth, which is why I got so excited when seeing them all for the first time. So what's Kasumi's awakening about? She got 3rd place in gymnastics, is merely threatened with losing her honor status because of it, and on the same day, she ends up in the new palace and somehow hears the voices of the few people bitching about her behind her back, and that triggers her awakening. What?! That's nothing compared to what the Phantom Thieves had to put up with! Her situation was just an unfair inconvenience! It was bullshit of the school to threaten removing her honor status when she still did well, but she didn't actually lose it, so she wasn't really screwed over by it. And she had only just learned there were people talking shit about her in that moment, so her awakening was just some knee-jerk reaction to that or something? The Phantom Thieves were awakening against things they had to deal with for some time, some even for years, and were much bigger issues than just, people said mean things about me. They were also directly confronting the shadow of someone who had screwed them over, and in Futaba's case, it was directed towards the Men in Black who blamed Wakaba's death on her. But in Kasumi's case, it's just against a regular enemy! I was even able to figure out that this palace belonged to Maruki from just this sequence of events, so it left me even more disappointed when I knew there could have been an opportunity to have a proper character-driven awakening. I know now that this is considered to be a fake awakening, but I don't see it that way since it's still how she got her persona and her Phantom Thief attire and everything in the first place, which did leave a permanent stain on my impressions of her, even after the twist. All of these issues resulted in me viewing Kasumi as a Mary Sue. She has a perfect personality, no character flaws, almost everyone loves her, with the few who don't being treated as insignificant and just vanishing after her awakening where everybody goes back to loving her again. Her powers are practically given to her with barely any effort, and the meta-nav just magically appeared on her phone for no reason to kickstart the awakening in the first place. But then came the twist, where she is actually Sumire, and the real Kasumi was the sibling who died. After this reveal, she actually showed some proper emotion other than happiness, and got character flaws by trying to run away from her pain and hating herself over Kasumi's death. This finally made me start actually caring about her as a character because they gave me a reason to do so. At last! This is exactly what I wanted! But why did I have to wait over 100 hours in order to get it? My only story-related issue with the Sumire twist is that I wish this was the basis for Awakening rather than the pointless crap with the fake one. Imagine if when Joker, Akechi, and later the others go to save Sumire, they convince her to stop running away from her pain by bringing up all the things they've been through and how they still keep going. Then Maruki tries to desperately persuade her to keep living as Kasumi, to which she replies with something like, "No, they're right. I was a fool for believing I could be Kasumi. I could never be like her. I won't run away from this pain anymore. I'll face it head on. I'll use it to grow and carve my own path as the person I am. I am Sumire Yoshizawa!" Then you got the music, the fire, the blood, and Sanjian appearing for the first time, giving her a proper will of rebellion since she'd be rebelling against Maruki's version of reality. I think that would be so much better! So by the end of the game, I ended up not really liking Kasumi, but having a better impression of Sumire, to the point that I think, she's alright. I just think her entire character arc could have been written so much better to make her more in line with the Phantom Thieves and Akechi. All that's left is to go over the final of the Big Three. Fortunately, this one is way more positive from my perspective, but it's still something that many people will hate me for since they all feel the complete opposite about it. When I properly got into the Gunvolt series from playing the Striker Pack, being the first and second games there gave me a very strong opinion about a prominent character in the series. Koben. But upon seeing other people's reactions to the games, I found things to be quite different. Everywhere I go, I see people absolutely detest Koben as a character. calling them things like extremely unlikable, an insufferable prick, and obviously a racist, with some even going on massive tirades about how much they hate him. However, I actually like Koben. In fact, I really like him. Let me make one thing absolutely clear before anything else so people don't go around accusing me of supporting a racist. While I like Koben, I don't agree with his beliefs on adepts, and I don't want him to succeed in his goal of killing them all. It's the same thing as liking a villain. You don't root for them most of the time, but you like watching them. Many people do that anyway, so I don't understand why I shouldn't be allowed to like Koben. The main reason why I like Koben essentially boils down to thinking he's a well-written character within the context of the world he lives in. On top of being the demonstration of how adepts face prejudice and acting as the contrast to Gunvolt's hopeful views of wanting humans and adepts to live together in peace, when you look more into Koben's past, his hatred of adepts actually makes a lot of sense from his perspective. Granted, this isn't touched on too much in the games themselves, but it does exist. Inti Creates made this radio drama style prequel series to the games on YouTube called Fleeting Memories, and the second episode of this series focuses on Dr. Kamizono, Koben's father. From this, you learn that Kamizono hated adepts and deemed them to be a threat to humanity. Exactly the same viewpoint that Koben possesses. So it's highly likely that Koben adopted this idea from his father from hearing him talk about adepts in such a manner when he was probably still an impressionable kid. Then, long story short, Kamizono was killed by an adept during an experiment backed by Sumeragi. Sumeragi covered up the incident, which led Koben to believe that his father was assassinated by Sumeragi as he previously objected to their adept creating experiments. From Koben's point of view, the beliefs about adepts he heard from Kamizono had basically been confirmed by these events. First, he has the idea that adepts are evil in his mind, and then his dad gets killed for speaking up against an organization involved in making artificial adepts, and even has an adept division. Under different circumstances, Koben could have been less hostile towards adepts, but he was twisted into the adept-hating person he is now by the people and events around him, as opposed to people like Gunvolt who have witnessed good adepts firsthand, resulting in him becoming so blinded by his hatred for adepts that he fails to see reason and recognize when an adept is actually not evil because the ideology has been so deeply ingrained in his head. It's like he has a character as well as possessing character flaws most of the time. Imagine that! I find that an interesting way to write an antagonist because of the paths they can explore with it, which they do. In the first game, I liked Koben more so because I just thought he was this cool, badass antagonist with how I seem to end up liking a lot of edgy characters for some reason. But it was when I played Gunvolt 2 that I started to properly like him for his actual character, and that was because of his relationship with his sister, Meetil, who is supposed to be his twin even though she looks years younger than him. Meetil is Koben's equivalent to Jewel, being the girl he strives to protect and is the motivation behind many of his actions in the game. During cutscenes, and especially in his conversations with Meetil and Lola, you see that Koben does legitimately care for and loves his sister. His dialogue when he speaks to her is written in this more gentle and compassionate tone, and his voice actor even appears to speak in a slightly calmer manner from what I can grasp of Japanese speaking. He's like a completely different person in these moments, but in a way that feels natural rather than just getting a personality transplant. I also love how this puts a lot of Koben's hatred for adepts into more perspective on top of the information you get from Fleeting Memories. He thinks adepts are a threat to humanity and lost his dad due to the actions of adepts and those who use them as weapons. So a big part of him wanting to kill all adepts is to protect Meetil. This made me like Koben a lot more than I did previously because it shows that he has a kind and caring side rather than being this always angry and violent person. And like I said before, the all adepts are evil ideology being so ingrained in his mind is what causes his aggressive side to come to the forefront in most other scenarios. And if there's anything I seem to randomly and coincidentally love more than edgy characters, it's badass characters with soft sides, and I think Koben greatly embodies that. They do a similar thing in Luminous Avenger X as well. While that game does take place in an alternate timeline, it still displays Koben being caring towards others through how he interacts with Kohaku and the other Minos. They even give him several more friendly interactions with Lola. It also kinda helps that Koben's more in the right in that game, as in this timeline, adepts reigned supreme and wiped out most of humanity. Meanwhile, when seeing everyone else hate on Koben, they act like his angry side is the only aspect of his character and criticize him for being one note. He went from being the proto-man of the series in the first game to being the base, the antagonistic character with anti-hero qualities. By the end of Gunvolt 2, they put Koben's love for Meatil and hatred for Adepts in direct conflict with one another, which made me feel sympathy for him, and creates a huge inner conflict of his character that opens up even more ways for him to develop in the future that I really want to see capitalized on. If done well, I could see myself liking Koben even more as a result. I say this because I was left very anxious by him being completely absent in the reveal trailer for Gunvolt 3. I swear, if they don't continue his character arc they've set up, or even worse, if he doesn't appear in the game at all, I'll be
disappointed!